Greetings and welcome to another episode of I Survived Youth Group in the 90s. I'm your host, Scott, and with me, as always, is my prodigious co-host, Caleb. Caleb, what's going on? How are you doing?
I've heard the word prodigious, but I don't know what it means.
I don't know how to spell it, but I think it means you're cool. So,
okay.
Congratulations.
I heard it in a movie or something. I don't know, well, whatever.
Probably. We're back again to talk about the experience growing up as youth group kids in the 90s and how that has shaped our adult lives. We'll talk to old friends about their faith journeys spanning from the 90s to today and discuss current cultural topics through the lens of someone who grew up during that era. Caleb, this is a fun one. Who are we talking to today?
Yeah, it was from October Sky. The nerdy kid says prodigious when they launch a rocket. That was the movie I know prodigious from. Holy cow. That's a weird pull by me. Pop culture nerd. Okay, so the guest today is Brock, and he is a guy that I've had on my music show a couple times. I've gotten to know online. He was nice enough to join. He's actually produced his own episode of my music show because I wasn't going to get one done. So he jumped on and took over hosting duties with a buddy and or somebody else we've met online. And so, Brock was excited to join the show, and it was great to have him on.
Your online CCM community is pretty tight group.
It's a fun group. It's the only reason I'm still on Twitter. I mean, it really is the only reason I want to be there anymore is just to hang out with those people. So, yeah.
Right. No, he was really thoughtful. He shared a screenshot of the recording that he was doing, and it had his notes on the side. I'm like, dude, you put down a lot of notes. Yeah. And so you'll hear me from time to time, like thinking that question has been answered. I'm going to move on to the next one. Nope. He just keeps on going, which is great because his answers were excellent.
Yeah. Which I think is, he's listened to the show enough to, I think, kind of already have like an idea too. Like I feel like we've started to see a theme where we kind of started. Leo was one of the first people to really mention it, where people get those questions, and I think sometimes it takes them on a little journey. And some people take those questions, and once they get thinking about it, once they get answering, once they kind of start writing down some of their thoughts, I wonder if it does feel a little. We keep on using the word therapy, but like it does feel a bit like that. To like, wow, I haven't thought about these things in a while, and he definitely took the time to get those thoughts down and have some real thorough responses to the questions.
Yeah, he was very intentional that way. But no, he's got some fun stories, especially what his youth group was able to do, given where he grew up, and not super crazy, but still really really interesting, innovative ways that a church was trying to keep kids involved and active and having a good time. So. He was a real fun guy to talk to. Anything from the interview that you can remember that sticks out for you?
It's just another interview where you have somebody who has a lot of high praise for their youth pastor, even if they don't maybe 100% agree with everything that was taught to them. And that's what we continue to hear, just these high praises for, volunteers. And specifically, I think, he really has just a real high opinion of the youth pastor that he had. He shared a couple of really interesting things too. I'll leave him for the episode, but like that was the theme that jumped out to me kind of again from this episode.
For sure. Same. Well, Brock, thank you very much for giving us a couple hours of your time the other night. It was really fun to talk with you. And as always, thank you to you, the listener, for listening to this episode. We hope that you enjoy. Thanks very much.
I want to break in and quickly remind everyone that the views and opinions expressed on this episode of I Survived Youth Group in the 90s may not be held by or even approved of by everyone appearing on this episode. One of the goals of this show is to give everyone a safe space to share their opinions and thoughts on deeply personal matters of faith. We are not looking to start an argument, but instead we want to let people share how they feel. During our interviews and discussions, we may not represent every point of view on a given subject, and we understand that this may be frustrating at times, but it is the nature of a podcast discussion with a limited amount of time. We also know and want to acknowledge that our memories of events that happened 25 to 30 years ago may not be 100% accurate. We assume everyone's best intentions as they share how they remember the experience of their youth. Now, back to the show.
All right, we are joined by my new friend, at least, Caleb's old friend, Brock. Brock, thank you for jumping on this evening. It's really nice to meet you. I have to say, you have a tremendous mustache that I am very, very jealous of. That would take me 8 lifetimes to grow.
Oh, shucks.
It's not just the mustache, it's the chin that goes with it. It's the combination that really makes it work.
Wow.
Were you ready for this type of comment?
I mean, thank you. I guess I've been conditioned to accept this sort of thing without fighting it because it's more generous. So yes, thank you. It's kind of you.
It's the least we could do to thank you for jumping on. So, no, we really appreciate you being here and wanting to chat with us about your journey growing up through youth group and things like that. So as always, we really like to start from the beginning, of course. Like, tell us, what was your upbringing? When did you attend youth group in the 90s? Were you in a Christian home? That sort of thing. Tell us where you started.
Yeah. I am from Washington State, and I was born in 1982, which meant that I was entering high school youth group in 1996. Thereabouts.
Perfect.
But yeah, I was a kid at the tail end of the 90s in a conservative Baptist Association church in just outside of Seattle, outside of Tacoma. The town was Auburn, but yeah, we were at church there, and yeah, that was where I spent 4 solid years. We had started attending there in junior high. I had left, my family had left a previous church, which was an American Baptist, or was it Swedish Baptist? I forget. There's a lot of different types of Baptists out there.
There are.
And so, yeah, that was there was some disagreements, not about theology, but just about, I think, someone felt like somebody else ripped somebody off, and so there's a big split, and people went their separate ways. So we were looking for a new place to call home as a church, and so I was in 5th or 6th grade when all that kind of started, and then we spent a couple of years wandering in the wilderness looking for a new church home, and that was where we landed. Was eventually this kind of on its way to being a mega church. It had been an established Baptist church in Auburn, Washington for years and years. Grace Community Church was the name, if anybody listening knows it. Most people probably don't at this point, but yeah, it was, I think maybe like 500 people or something. It was a church with 2 services, which was almost unheard of to me at that time. I had no idea, no concept of it, because everything else we had been a part of had been so small. But by the time I graduated, I think it had grown into a 2,000-person church, maybe with 3 services and, weekend stuff and all this. Like, it was a real big production by the end of that. So, but that was where I spent my high school years, and yeah, a lot of formative things that I'm sure we'll get into detail about.
Sure. And so your parents, your family, they were in it kind of from the beginning, and they just kind of found their way to this burgeoning church in Washington.
Right. Yeah. We had grown up, and we were always very religious. Like, it was, it was my experience was that, I was born almost in a church, just like down the street from the church my parents were going to at the time. Got baptized as a very little kid, and got, what is it? Not confirmed. What do they call it? Dedicated, as an infant, that sort of thing.
There you go.
So yeah, I think it was, in some form or fashion, extensive involvement in church life was kind of part of my life from being very young. And I'm one of those people who has the story of, I woke up in the middle of the night and my mom, led me through the sinner's prayer when I was 4. And so it was, from there on, just had a really life centered around the whole thing. Like, I was in it for a penny and a pound, and it was the fabric of life. So I was also homeschooled, so that meant that basically it was just like tailor-made. It was my life was going to be a religious life. So yeah.
Well, it'll be interesting to hear what the result is of all that tailor-made Christianity in your life. But I'm a little curious on the point of the church expanding so much. Looking back on it, our church also kind of had the pedal to the metal and grew pretty fast, adding services and a lot of people during the same time. Like, what do we think was happening in mid-90s, early 2000s, where all of a sudden these churches were just kind of booming in size, and in 4 years, quadrupling in size? That's pretty significant. Do we remember what was happening back then that was causing something like that?
I'll say for our church, I mean, our youth group was what was blowing up at first. I mean, that's the weird thing about our church experience, is that youth group got so big so fast. I mean, and so that was kind of driving a lot of it, it felt like, for us, just because for a while we didn't have a head pastor. And then it's really after the head pastor gets hired, I mean, it's probably after we're gone that they really, the church really balloons and they start going multiple services. Because I think even when I left, there was still maybe a second service on Sunday morning, but it's after that they go multiple services. So I don't know what it was. I mean, I think it was just charismatic leaders, I think, had a lot to do with it. And I think some of that started to get, I'm going to sound more cynical than I really am trying to be. It's those personalities are marketed more. And I don't think that was necessarily what was happening at our church, and that there was like some evil intentions by that. But you definitely see that in some of the huge mega churches. There's definitely a marketing of a personality, and maybe that became something that gripped people more. So I don't know. I don't have a strong answer outside of our youth group took off, and that was fun.
Well, and maybe to that point, like, was it sometimes the youth group driving something like that, where it was drawing in families who, for 3 young dudes like us, like, they wanted something that was a little bit more, for lack of a better word, again, I'm not like Caleb trying to be super cynical, but entertaining, right? Like, they needed something to keep our attention. So this was the draw. Now, my parents never ended up going to the church I went to, which was, maybe a little bit different. But, if they're drawing kids in because it's there's some entertainment value and we're actually having fun, that's something I still see that persists today. So, Brock, what do you think?
In my experience, I know that we were drawn in. We're definitely a musical family, and Caleb, you and I forget how much we've talked about that in terms of my personal history, but certainly I was a big fan of music as a kid because my family was also really into music. My dad loved to sing in ensembles. My mom played guitar. She loved to lead songs for children's groups and that sort of thing, and so the church that we ended up landing at had a really, really strong church music program. And I think it was, I mean, I don't have a lot of exposure to the variety of what was happening in the 90s, but I get the sense that what was happening at the church that we landed at was kind of the epitome of some of the goals, I think, of what people were shooting for with music. We had a music pastor who was a dedicated music pastor. He was hired on staff, and eventually he had, I think, an assistant music pastor. But then there was just a ton of folks with musical talent working as volunteers underneath him to kind of help these really massive productions be pulled off. Because, one of the biggest things that was part... I know you guys talk a lot about, like the midweek program sort of stuff, Wednesday night or what have you. And the church that we landed at never had like a Wednesday night midweek program for the kids, like a big production sort of thing. There was usually there were like Bible studies scattered throughout the week, and as the church got bigger, as more people got involved, then there was more of those. But the big thing that we were involved with was, Sunday morning class was like its own church service for kids. And then there was big church, as we called it, where you go to where all the adults are as well. And the really good kids went to both, but you weren't, necessarily expected to. The thing that happened on Sunday night was that from kindergarten to college, and people who were just a couple years out of high school, there were different ages of choirs for everybody. So,
oh wow,
I was just developing a basso profundo. My voice dropped in junior high, and so I think for 2 years in junior high, I was developing bass, which meant that I was searching for the notes and trying to find them, but it still kind of sounded like a frog, kind of croaking them out. But that was where my voice was headed, so that was the part that I would sing. And yeah, just making friends with people. I was the tallest bass kid in the back row, and so standing next to the other tall bass kids and making jokes and cracking up when we should have been paying attention. I've got a lot of respect for the folks that led those rehearsals, because you try and make a group of kids do anything. Nonetheless, like learning 4 parts and trying to sing and sound decent. There's a lot of talent there, and there's a lot of love from those adults that they were like, hey, this is what we're doing. We're going to sing these songs. It's going to be great. And so, for me, that was one of the big things I think that kind of kept me there, was that I really enjoy this whole vocal performance thing. It's I was nervous as all get out. I think about it. Even standing in a choir of like 35 to 45 kids, you still feel like you're the only one on stage. And so, that was a big piece of kind of the activities that I really enjoyed, and one of the pieces that kind of kept me there for starters. So.
Especially if those people who are trying to keep you all attentive are volunteering, like they don't have to be there. You know?
Gosh, no.
Good on them for trying to keep you, not only singing well, but also just simply paying attention. So, it will always fascinate me how much of a industry boom there was for evangelicalism in the 90s, just simply because they figured it out. Like, hey, families, not just kids, but families, they want something that's a little bit more engaging and a little bit more real. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It just can veil some things that maybe need to be not so hidden. At any rate, thank you for that question that is definitely not on our list. So thanks for going there.
Yeah.
Tell us just about your faith in the 90s. What are some adjectives that you would use to describe your faith in that high school time?
I don't know if it was communicated explicitly, but for me, certainly certainty was one of the things that was a big value. I think, it was a combination because, again, I grew up in a family that was really like, the fabric of our home life was based around you have your morning devotions and you pray at meals and you do a Bible reading at dinner and these sorts of things. So definitely a lot of time spent just kind of getting to know the stories. All my entertainment was Bible stories and Adventures in Odyssey from Focus on the Family. So much content that was just kind of geared around, like I didn't have a lot of non-religious entertainment. And so there was a lot of that as well. But with that as the fabric of my life, a lot of getting to know, what is the story of the Bible, who are the authors, what's the content, what's being taught, what's the message of Jesus, what's the message of Paul in the epistles, what's in Revelation, all these things. I had kind of an encyclopedic knowledge of the Bible, by the time I got to high school, and so there was a lot of that just kind of worked its way into me, and the patchwork of what was given in Sunday morning sermons, what was shared from youth pastors for Sunday morning class or for camps that we would attend or something like that. All of it kind of came together to make me feel that it was really important that I have a lot of certainty in this, that I be very convicted and very sure of what I believe, and that I was that this is the truth. I know it. I believe it. I hold on to it. I persist in the faith. And so I think that was one of the biggest things probably in terms of what it looked like for me. I was really invested in kind of finding out what is the right way to believe, what's the right way to behave. And so those two kind of went in tandem. I was pretty literal. As I was thinking about this, I was thinking about kind of what I would get into. And when I was in middle school and kind of early high school, I remember science and the Bible was a big thing. I remember as a kid, there was this traveling not entertainer, but like a speaker who would talk about dinosaurs in the Bible. And, for a little kid, it was a big draw, like, oh, he's going to talk about dinosaurs. Let's figure this out. And it was kind of this young earth creation perspective that was exactly what I was looking for, as a young kid, in like third or fourth grade. I'm like, all right, let's get these answers. Let's figure this out, because I like dinosaurs and I like the Bible. I want Jesus and dinosaurs to get along. Oh. And so figuring out, how to harmonize those things, kind of how does science stack up with, and, are there ways that we can explain this? So that was one thing. I remember in my youth pastor's office, he had a big bookshelf and all kinds of stuff. And he had a harmony of the Gospels, which you may have seen or heard of, and kind of trying to find a way to make all four gospel narratives mesh together, and trying to figure out how to reconcile things that might have been either told differently or presented as different stories, different numbers, those sorts of things. And so trying to figure out what that looked like was really fascinating to me, because I was like, it's got to make sense. It's the truth, so it has to come together somehow. And I remember my youth pastor even giving me the kind of the caution when he lent it to me. He's like, here, you can read this, but just know it. You might be a little disappointed if you're looking for everything to be perfectly meshed up and lined up. So I appreciated him kind of, steering me away from maybe my most dangerous convictions in that, as he was letting me borrow the book, kind of giving me a little bit of gentle guidance with it. But then I was also thinking, like, before I was in high school, way before, I think I was trying to figure out, like, how would you build a family tree from all the genealogies in the Bible? And so sitting down, and I think I was probably in middle school, like early computer systems, and there was this genealogical software that would let you build a family tree. And so I was like, okay, start in Genesis, work my way down. Here we go. Let's find out. Let's make it line up. And so just so many of those things, like those are all examples of kind of how I saw the world, and I think, I was influenced by my family, by the people around me, to kind of see the world in more or less that way, that the Bible and the faith that I'm raised with, this is the rubric. This is how you see the world. And this is how you make everything make sense in the world around you. So
I'm going to ask a question of Caleb, actually, because I'm a little curious. How... Don't give me that look. You're fine.
I'm not good at these.
Yeah, I know. How do they deal with science now in the homeschool world? Like, is that still a thrust? Or, again, you don't have to answer. It's fine. Cut it out if you need to. But, like, I'm just curious if that still persists.
I mean, I should get my 13-year-old down here because he's taking biology. I mean, my guess is they steer clear of those sorts of... They're not using biology to prove evolution, obviously. And I've said it before, like she's 16 now. She's pretty even keel. But like one of the most pretty amazing moments was she was talking about this idea of new Earth versus young Earth creationism sort of thing. And I know that in her co-op, because the homeschool circles are still super conservative in general. There's been a widening post-COVID of lots more variety, but I mean, when I told her that I'm a old Earth and more than likely believe in evolution and don't have any issues with it, at the very least, I have zero issues with it. Like, her jaw dropped because I think what she's being taught is just, it's very creation museum. I think it's a lot of that sort of stuff where there was dinosaurs on the ark. Even though, I don't think that works, but whatever. That's neither here nor there. So it's a lot of that. It's a lot of answers in Genesis, science, and kind of taking those things and kind of, a take on it that I think is, for me, a little problematic. But that's also why we don't necessarily fit in with the homeschool community in a lot of ways.
Little by little, maybe you'll change things, but
yeah, that's not happening.
Brock, your story is very similar to many others, and I always wonder when we talk about the certainty thing, why was it such an important part of the process? Because I don't know, I'm not an expert, but I have studied church history. It's really not a thing for most other denominations, I should say. It's really not an aspect of them, like, you believe it now here's why you really should believe it. There's so much emphasis on making sure we're right, and I don't know if that betrays something about it or not. It feels like there was such a heavy thrust to make sure every little aspect or detail was proven correct.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it seems like, and I think a lot about, because I spent so much time with my mom particularly, and one thing that sticks out to me that is interesting, because, I think the certainty question kind of applied universally, and so it applied to facts and figures, it applied to science and the Bible, but it also applied to some of the softer things, like I was thinking about this just this last summer because I stopped by to see my dad. My mom passed on last year, and so I've been thinking a lot about our relationship, since then. But in terms of when I was really young, I went back to my hometown, and I was just like kind of driving around, seeing a couple of places I remembered from my childhood. And one of the places that I visited coming through town last summer was there's this little pathway from the elementary school over to the neighborhood where we lived, and we were close enough to walk to and from when I was in elementary school for a brief period. Most of my time was homeschool, but I think second grade and half a third So it was like halfway through the second grade year. I was walking home with my mom, and I'd had an incident with a kid at school where, he and I were friends, but he was annoying me. And so I shouted at him. I don't think I hit him, but it was just one of those frustrated kid, lashes out at other kid, stop, leave me alone. But it was like enough that the teacher was like, you got to talk to your mom about this, And so as we're walking home, my mom has this conversation, and she's telling me that, the thing that Jesus says is that we should love everybody, even our enemies, even the people that make us feel bad, or the people that we don't care for, the people that are doing things we don't like. We got to love everybody. And I said, who loves everybody? That's ridiculous. As a second grade, I'm like, that doesn't make any sense at all. But she's like, it's the truth. It's, it's what we believe, and it's how we treat people, And so I think it's important, if I'm telling the story of certainty, that there are a lot of bones I have to pick with certainty these days, but the one that I don't is the one that that I remember from that particular incident, that it was really important to her that if Jesus says we love people, this is what we do. And I think I see that in my life since then. I'm 42 now. I've seen that play out, and that's a value that is stuck because she was so certain about it. And over the years, I've become certain of that too, that it is important to react nonviolently, to react lovingly, to have generosity for people, whether they have it for you or not. That's a big piece. So, yeah.
That's a great angle to it, is being certain of some of the more, I wouldn't say softer. They're not soft. In fact, they're more difficult, to be quite honest with you. It's easy to be certain about whether dinosaurs were on the ark or not, because it really has no bearing on any choice we make throughout the day.
No dinosaurs today, yeah.
Unfortunately. But to be certain about loving everyone where they're at is like a commitment. So that's cool that you were able to still draw that out from that experience as a 7-year-old,
Yeah. And again, because she was so certain of it when she shared that with me, and that's a huge value that,
Sure.
Again, I've carried it forward till today.
Sure. Well, let's talk about your youth group experience a little bit more, and just in the sense of like what activities, teachings, interactions created really vivid memories for you that you still remember today.
We talked about the youth choirs, and so there's so many memories attached to that, from the rehearsals where we had kind of a sort of, it was interesting because the music ministry and the youth ministry weren't like linked to each other. They were kind of separate operations within the church, but obviously they had the support of each other. Like, the youth pastor says, yeah, you can have these kids in your youth choirs. And the youth pastor says, okay, let's do this. But there was almost like a quasi discipleship or accountability group or small group discussion sort of thing. Like before we worked on voices and whatnot, we would work on our souls and work on how we were doing, just in terms of our lives and things to talk about, topics of discussion, things to pray for each other about, and that sort of thing. So I remember a lot of that, a lot of time spent. The actual performances, like I mentioned, the church that I was at, the music was a big production, and so every holiday we had enormous Christmas performances, like 2-3 hour sort of thing. It was something with an intermission. All the youth choirs from kindergarten to high school would perform. Adult people would come in and sing as well. It was just this big blowout, and so a lot of fun. And then the choir tours, of course, as well, going to different churches around the Northwest. We went as far as Montana. I never went to California, but I know they did that occasionally. It was just like big tours on old school buses and sleeping on church floors, eating spaghetti in people's houses, singing to people at youth correction facilities and that sort of thing. So there was that, but then also like so many memories of summer camp. There was enormous kind of DIY summer camp. I don't know how common this was, and I'm not sure, I haven't talked to everybody, so I don't know if this is something that a lot of people did or not, but to me it seemed pretty unique that the youth pastor loved to water ski, and he had other friends, who were youth group adults and volunteers that would help with youth group stuff, but they loved to water ski too, and so, we'd go out to this campground in Idaho. It was like a 9-hour drive in like 99-degree heat across eastern Washington, 8 hours on a bus until you get to go to this campground in Idaho. It was on Lake Pend Oreille, which is one of the deepest lakes I think in the Northwest at least, and so it's really good for water skiing. Apparently, there used to be a naval installation there. They would like test submarines this lake because it was so deep, and so super cold even on a 99-degree day. And so it was the perfect conditions because you got this wonderful water, you got these boats, these people driving boats, and everybody signs up to do water skis. So between morning sermon where you'd listen to somebody talk, a speaker, go out and go water skiing, have lunch, have games, etc., have an evening speaker as well. But the whole thing was, they had 3-4 buses worth of kids coming out to this camp. And then they had like their own box truck, and they would build an entire kitchen on this picnic shelter.
Oh my gosh.
So they had, additional tents over the cooking and cleaning areas. They had sinks and plumbing and stoves and ranges, fridges, everything just came in, and they had all these people putting this thing together. And so it was like building an entire city there at Farragut State Park every year. I remember going out with the setup team one year, like day before camp, to unload refrigerators and unbox stuff and build the plumbing and all this stuff. And so yeah, it was really something. We slept in tents. Wow. It was just like, they were just campsites. The church would just rent every campsite in this loop every summer. And then, the guys had a tent area. So there's like 10 or 15 tents full of guys sleeping in their dirty socks or whatever. And then, the ladies' tent area was far enough away for it to be safe, so that everybody was over there. There were solar-powered showers in the campground, so some people would take a shower in the morning, some people wouldn't. But it was guaranteed that if you took a shower in the morning, you'd have hot water. If you took a shower in the afternoon, you would not. So, yeah, really something.
All just to be on the lake and water ski the whole time.
Yeah, well, and I mean that's what a lot of people did.
Wow.
And the adults who drove the boats had to go out and test the water every morning, so they get up at like 6 a.m. So if you had been up until 11 o'clock at night, trying to flirt with the person you were interested in and not getting enough sleep, you could still wake up at 5:30 in the morning, have an abbreviated breakfast, and then go out with these guys and take a water ski trial run on the glassy water before it got all choppy in the middle of the day. So
interesting.
Man,
quite something. But
Caleb, we never did anything that kick-ass. Like we just I mean, no offense to anyone, we just didn't have the opportunity to like do any of that. But even out here, I mean, we do a skiing. Did we go to the Boundary Waters as a group? No, we just didn't do that. Like that's a really cool thing that they did.
There's a lot of lakes out there, right?
There are a lot of lakes.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So I hear.
In the fall, we'd go up to Camp Chaminade, but and that's where PFR came from, just for reference.
That's right.
But like it was just it wasn't DIY at all. It was DIY. I got it right. I always want to say DIY for some reason, but it was this is very, very established thing. And I think most of the camps around here are that. They are very, very established. And maybe it's because to use them year round, you have to be because of the winters and people want to get as much use out of them. Because, you could go to winter camp as well. And the camps get used not as much in the winter, but they still get used in the winter. And so, man alive, yeah, that's a crazy setup. I've never heard of anything like that.
Because I went to a couple like more traditional camps as well, where people would, it was up in the woods in the mountains, you had cabins or whatever. And, we had those types of experiences too, but not, the crowning jewel of the high school youth group experience at Grace Community Church was you get on buses and you go out to Idaho and you do water skiing for a week. Wow. and you talk about Jesus and you sing songs. So.
All right, real talk. Did anyone get baptized while water skiing? Just
oh man,
was it like if you do this now, we will baptize you on the boat later on?
Baptists are real particular about the foundational piece of what makes them unique in Christian denominations. So I don't remember. I want to say at least once we might have had some sort of baptism in the swim area, but I don't recall. I think usually that was the sort of thing that would have been done at the church itself in a baptismal, as is right and proper.
That's true. Missed opportunity, though, because that'd be a cool video to show on the church screen later on.
I do love the idea of water skiing for Jesus. That seems like that's a slogan you could see for sure in the 90s.
Yeah. I will say the one bone I have to pick with this, and I think this is more as an adult volunteer going back later when I was older, but the guys, they were super into water skiing, and apparently the chump move is to ski with two skis. You start with two skis when you're learning to balance yourself, but once you're anybody worth anything as a water skier, you're going to kick off that one ski and go slalom.
You drop one.
And so I loved water ski. I think I didn't learn to water ski until I was an inner tuber, I think, when I was in high school. So when I was an adult volunteer in the mid-aughts, that was when I was actually water skiing. And that was when they were like, kick it off, do one ski. And I was always like, I like two. It feels good. I can balance. I can stand up. And I could never stay up on one. I just never figured it out. It was high pressure situation. So
nothing like being peer pressured when you're going 80 miles an hour
by
on a
your
lake.
adult volunteers. That's right. Yeah,
100%. Well, let's put a bow on your youth group experience, as a high schooler. Just overall, what did you love about it? What are some things you just really look back fondly?
Yeah. I know, obviously, the various experiences. We didn't get into the other types of events, too, because you'd have, like, overnight sleepovers. There was World Vision's 30-hour famine where you'd starve and raise money to feed kids somewhere else in the globe. All kinds of events. There was one, was it American Yuckiators, is what they called it, and it was just this, it's the stuff that you till into the ground to help soil retain its moisture. But if you just put it in a swimming pool, you can play weird games with it, for an entire day. And so that was the classic, like the epitome of youth group weirdness, right? Is just like, let's play a weird, gross game, and it involves a huge tub of slime. So there's so many memories about the various events, I think, that were connected to this. There's definitely also, as a homeschooled kid who didn't get out much, that was my primary social life in a lot of ways. And all of the ladies I was interested in at that age were at the youth group. And so I did not date there. And that's probably all for the best. But there were so many people to be interested in, and I had so much interest. So it's hard to tell the story of me being in high school at church without referencing at least that there were a lot of people that the fact that there were girls who would talk to me was really that was a big boost for me. So
no wonder you enjoyed going.
Oh, for sure. Again, it was my pride because so I had, obviously my friends, for example, my friend Joe was the youth pastor's son, but he and I were also basses. We met in the junior high choir in the back row because we were the two tallest guys. Mm-hmm. I think he was taller sitting and I was taller standing. So there you go. But he and I are still friends to this day. We stay in touch. We don't live in the same area, but we try and get together. We try and chat. That was a friendship that was really meaningful to me at that time because again, didn't have a whole lot of social interaction. Didn't have a lot of connections to people. Mm-hmm. But also, I think I'm also grateful that I think from where I stand today, I probably take issue and have a lot of differences with a lot of the things I was taught. But I am grateful for my youth pastor. He was the guy that, basically, he was the reason that made me choose youth ministry as my major when I went to Bible college. Yeah. And Gene Popino is his name. He's still around. He's no longer a youth minister, but he was one of the few in I feel like the average that I was told for youth pastors just across the board in Christian churches across America, the average tenure of a youth pastor is about 18 months. You get started, you go through about 1 year cycle. At some point, you raise the ire of the pastor or one of the elders or something along those lines. And so if, for whatever reason, if it's because you're following Jesus too closely, then you get fired. If you're not following Jesus closely enough and you do dumb things that get people hurt or take advantage of people, you also get kicked out. Mm-hmm. And so just across the board, there's not a lot of long tenured youth pastors. But Gene was one of the ones that he had been at it for 25 years, I think, by the time I got to high school. And so he knew what he was doing, and I think he was doing it well. And that's one of the things that sticks with me is that his leadership was based around similar to what my mom had in terms of, you love your enemies. The big message that Gene came back to again and again was it's about loving God and loving other people. You do this out of love. You do it for love. And I think that avoided some of the pitfalls that you hear people talking about with their youth group experiences. There's enough stories out there of people who had bad experiences, or people who focused on the wrong things, or spent too much time on the minor topics. And I don't think Gene did that. Overall, he was talking about let's love God, let's love each other, let's make disciples who are going to do that. And in a lot of ways, I think that avoided some of the biggest problems that I hear other people talking about. So. I guess I'm grateful in that regard that I don't have a traumatic story about church, because a lot of people leave church because they have trauma. And I don't have a big desire to burn the place down. Some people are really, they harbor a lot of animosity about their experience or about what they were taught. Nobody's perfect. I wouldn't say that anybody is, and I wouldn't say that, my experience was either. Otherwise I'd probably be there today. But, but in terms of what was done and what was presented, I feel like the focus was in the right place. And so that meant a lot to me.
It's good that you had that kind of guiding principle there. Cause like you said, I don't think, some people might not, but if it's not there, I think people are more apt to just walk away completely, because what's left at the end of the day.
Right.
It's the most important thing. And good on Gene. Hashtag Gene. Hope he's listening. Maybe he is.
Well, and I think he is now an elder at a church in my hometown, or in the area that I grew up in, of a church where I think the guys that I was a camp counselor for are on the worship team. So
excellent.
Kind of a full circle moment.
Wow. Indeed. Well, now kind of let's transition to how things have changed, where you're at today. It's 25, 30 years later. How does your faith now compare to where you were at back then?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if we led with this, so sorry for bearing the lead. I think I have become a token agnostic for a lot of folks. And so I've had enough time to kind of consider my life, where I've been, where I'm at. And I think it was 2013 when I finally decided to be completely honest with myself and just admit that I've kind of thought myself out of a lot of the positions I used to hold as a younger person. I guess intellectual rigor is part of it. And I can blame Rob Bell. I don't know if you guys remember from his book, Velvet Elvis, had the whole thing. I think it was towards the beginning of the book about the two ways you can see your faith. One is you see it as a brick wall, and if it's threatened, if somebody starts taking bricks out of the wall, the whole thing starts to crumble and fall apart. And that was kind of the perspective that I took. And I think his metaphor is that the other way to see faith is that it's like a trampoline. And you can take springs out of a trampoline and you might bounce differently. You might bounce in a different direction. But the point of a trampoline is joy. And you're going to get joy if you stay on the trampoline. If you take bricks out of the wall and the wall is there to keep people in and keep people out, then the wall is not going to work. So my wall crumbled. And I think I'm not I'm not bitter about anything. I'm not necessarily trying to burn things down, but to me, I had always been so invested in getting things right that the more things I kind of decided, based on what I'm reading, maybe some of the historicity isn't there. Maybe some of the science doesn't back up what, the sun may have stood still, when Moses held his arms up or something along those lines.
Right.
There's a lot of things that, to me, were less compelling in terms of seeing them as fact. But again, the emphasis, in a lot of places and from a lot of directions in my formative years was that this is all driving the fact that we treat each other well and that we love each other. And so, my subscribed beliefs have changed. I don't believe the same things that I used to. But I find that I think I'm still kind of aiming at a lot of the same things that I would love to make the world as good as I can for the people around me. I would love to pour what I've got into other people, that people would have a listening ear, a friend who stays with them, that somebody in my community might have food because I can donate to an organization that feeds them, those kinds of things. And that's all stuff that, was motivated by my faith growing up. It's still motivated by the same values. It's just not necessarily supported by the same belief structure. So
Sure. That's the comment you made about intellectual rigor resonates with me because that's part of my journey too, is just being honest with myself about what we learn over time, and if it stands up and to what we believed back then, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And people, I think, in both ways can kind of bend themselves backwards to justify things or make things right, kind of like you said, making a proposition that the sun had to stand still so time would figure, still be correct, that sort of thing. But I'm a little curious, was it any part of yourself in like high school, youth, was any part of you kind of thinking that way, like, oh, none of this matches up, I'm not convinced by it, or this is kind of intellectually confusing?
Yeah, for sure. Another thing that we did with this group was there was a kind of a regional conference, and they would host a youth conference every winter. So right after Christmas, we'd all get into buses and drive down to Portland and stay in a hotel and pull pranks on each other and go eat at Taco Bell. But the centerpiece was that, one, there were people there to flirt with. Two, there were people to listen to, people to learn from. Three, there were bands, and so you get to see bands perform at night. And so I think it was my sophomore or junior year. I remember kind of whatever the top, I don't even remember what the topic was right now, but I remember trying to figure out not just if I believed things, but what it even meant to believe. Like this really like high level kind of, I'm all torn up about, I can't even tell if I believe, because what if I have these doubts, And so everybody else was listening to Rebecca St. James in the main ballroom of the hotel. And I missed the show because I was out walking around under the clouds of Portland. Probably it was raining on me, and I was trying to figure out this epistemological sort of stuff. Like how do I put a point on it? As a sophomore in high school, I'm required to. So why can't I? And so I think as early as that, I was still trying to figure out kind of what's happening in my head here.
Sure. Well, like good for you for keep staying open to the journey. That's probably led you to a point you didn't expect it to. If it was starting early on, you've kind of kept stayed honest to it.
I hope so. I mean, that was kind of the point for me, was like, let's have a reasonable worldview. Let's have a thing that makes sense in terms of my experience and kind of does what I'm supposed to do. I'm not really interested in wasting a lot of time trying to figure things out that I don't need to figure out. And I don't want to waste a lot of time doing things if I'm not sure that they matter or if they're helpful,
Of course. Was there, I mean, besides the Rob Bell book, was there any certain event that kind of where you realized like, oh, this is different, or I got to change things because this just doesn't jive anymore?
Yeah. Talking about bricks in the wall and kind of where things come out or fall down. One of the things you guys had asked about was, is there a book or a teacher that's become important? And I was thinking about some of the primary voices that kind of led me in directions that felt like I could be honest with myself, and I could, that it was okay if I didn't agree with systematic theology, if I thought Sproul was full of it or something. And Donald Miller was one of the first voices, and he wasn't even talking about like necessarily tenets of belief. Donald Miller was just an artistic voice, and at that time, kind of like a slacker, like a hipster slacker in Portland, Oregon, who loved Jesus and lived in community, but also didn't have a problem with smoking pipes on the roof or drinking beers with Tony the Beat Poet at the Horse Brass. And so, just cultural things like, hey, someone can be devoted to this Christianity thing, and it could look completely different. That was a big piece for me of like, the way he's talking about this, I haven't heard people talk about it like this before. And it reframed a lot of the things of just what it can look like to be a person of faith and not look like kind of the cookie cutter evangelical. Brian McLaren was the guy that wrote A Generous Orthodoxy, and so he was one of the guys I think that informed. I felt like the book was entirely too long. I don't remember if I got through it or not. I probably skipped sections.
It is.
But I think there was one thing where he was talking about like, it might have been towards the end of that book where he said something to the effect of, I want there to be Muslim followers of Jesus and Jewish followers of Jesus, and Hindu followers of Jesus. I think that this like all kind of transcends and supersedes the religious ephemera that we hang on it, that, Jesus was about something that was bigger than any of us, any of the cultures that we come from. And that, the most important thing is that we're following him and listening to his message. And so that was big for me. Rob Bell, obviously, I think he had his own exit from evangelicalism because he was saying things that weren't safe for the culture he was in. He wrote Love Wins, and that was asking the same questions as C.S. Lewis, basically, in The Great Divorce, about what's the nature of the afterlife and what's happening here. But he put a finer point on it by asking questions that people found to be threatening. And so I was along with him that you don't necessarily have to believe in eternal torment for there to be a loving God and for there to be something good about the world and the story that it's all about. And then Shane Claiborne was a guy who was really interested in stripping things down and taking the focus away from big production and focusing on, like, what if we all live together? What if we take care of our neighborhoods and our neighbors and the people who don't have enough food or people who don't have places to live or that sort of thing. But then Derek Webb, who everybody knows as now like the person who will completely rip you from faith in Jesus and ruin your life, apparently. He was the singer from Caveman's Call who started his solo career, and he started by getting out of his own Calvinist viewpoints to be more widely kind of open and accepting of other kind of faith perspectives and whatnot. And he started talking about a lot of the same social justice issues. And then he talked himself out of his own, Calvinism, and he talked himself into having an affair with somebody too. So that's all part of his story. But he was somebody who I think after he recovered from kind of the storm of his own choices and his own belief change and all this stuff, he's come out at the end of that as kind of a very kind of open and accepting person who's willing to accept a lot of people where they are and willing to stand next to people who are kind of being told they don't belong. They don't belong with the people of Jesus, or they don't belong in a community of faith, or they don't belong in the world, period. And so, the trajectory of all those writers and songwriters and that sort of thing, those were all voices, I think, that kind of moved me to a place where I was a lot more comfortable. Like, if there are people who are having these same questions, people who are having the same doubts, or people who just believe that something in my own life and belief structure needs to change, those were voices that supported me along the way.
Caleb, we've been, I don't know, this will be like episode 35, 40, something like that. This is the first time we've talked about Donald Miller, who is, whatever he's doing now with his business coaching, good on him, I guess. But, his books, that was a big deal for me too. Like, you open that up and you're like, it makes sense from a commitment to the loving other people sort of thing and being non-confrontational in a way that I understand Jesus to be. And, that was a big one for me. I read a couple of Rob Bell books, but, I'm looking at all of Donald Miller's books on my shelf right now. So I'm happy to hear that was, some of the people you were reading, because they've been influential on a lot of people in different ways like this. So
I'm grateful for the bravery to say something that's not popular, that would cause your books not to sell or cause your records not to sell or that sort of thing. I feel like a lot of people are like, well, if I disagree with this, how do I make a living?
Right.
And it takes people who are brave enough to say, well, this is where I'm at, to give other people the support that they need to have similar thoughts or similar decisions.
Rob Bell had a lot of equity that he burned on that Love Wins book. He was really popular. I can't remember his Bible studies, but it kind of around the early 2000s-ish, he had Bible study videos out and things like that were kind of pushing a little bit. And all of a sudden you get the Love Wins book where hell may not be real. And it's just, everything's gone. He's used up all the good vibes and nature that he had earned. So good on him.
Who are we going to punish and how?
Exactly. Looking back on it with kind of this lens on faith that where you're at now, is there any part of your youth group experience that you struggle with or wish that was different?
I think as I was considering this, like, I don't have a lot of big bones to pick. Again, I'm not like upset about much, I'm really grateful for what I had. I think the thing that stuck out to me was that I think I mentioned briefly that there was a pretty big focus, and I think bigger as I got older towards my junior and senior years, bigger focus on discipleship as like a formal sort of arrangement that everybody should have. And I never had a disagreement with that. I mean, Jesus had disciples and he said to go make them, and so it was hard to argue with that. But I think in terms of what that looked like, what did I say? In my notes, I was trying to find how to word it, and it was the enmeshment of discipleship focus with popularity and social groups and status. And what that looked like was that the cool kids were on the leadership team, and so cool kids were discipling each other, cool kids were hanging out. I'm a little embarrassed of the fact that I think a guy invited me to basically join a discipleship sort of arrangement where we'd get together and talk about things, and I should have said yes because it was a really good idea. But I didn't think he was very cool, and so that was one reason. And then the other one was I was just like, this like formal discipleship stuff, this is all hooey. People are just cool people talking to each other. I don't want to be any part of that. And, so again, I'm not bitter about it. Again, I think I should have said yes. I think it would have been really good for me to have that sort of connection. But I think the way it was presented, I don't think that's necessarily the fault of the youth pastor or the leaders or any of the many adult volunteers. I think everybody had, the right perspective and they were motivated with the right things. But I think, it was just, I had a hard time separating that from people being cool and me not being cool and wanting to be cooler, and so sure. It was one of those things that hopefully I'm explaining it well enough. I'm not blaming anybody else. I just think my perspective was tainted by the fact that I was an insecure, uncool homeschool kid, and I wished I was something else. So yeah.
That discipleship group thing, Caleb, I think that's the one thing that surprised me the most is, for lack of a better phrase, Caleb and I were the popular kids in the youth group. I don't know why, but we were. And
congratulations.
Yes, I mean, it's a badge of honor I wear to this day. I still walk into churches and say, "Do you know who I am?" But
that's right. I have disciples. People respect me.
But like that group ended up being, like you said, like the popular group or the kids who were there for both services on Sunday, like you mentioned earlier, that sort of thing. And it really did kind of separate people. I know they were intending to train leaders and that sort of thing, but people who didn't make those groups or even who weren't invited, they felt out like on the outside. And to what end? I just don't understand.
It's really interesting. And maybe I've brought it up before. It was a story that got shared off air about when something happened to some leaders in the group. Like the way this got talked about amongst families in the church who had kids, it was this like cool kid, like almost celebrity nature. There was like this, like, oh, we have to talk to you about what's going on with these youth group kids. And because they were part of the leadership group, like it was just this really interesting story of like, I didn't even think about like when Brant was on the show, he talked about that idea of like, there was this separation. And that's where it first started to really become like my eyes were a little open to this idea that it was the cool kids. And then hearing somebody else even talk about this other story where like, it was almost like a celebrity level, like of like, oh, it's these celebrity youth group kids because they're in the leadership and they're part of that cool group. It was I was like kind of blown away actually by that story. And I'm not going to share more of the details. So I know this is super vague and I might just cut all this out. But yes, it was a very, very eye-opening experience to kind of hear somebody else talk about that experience and kind of how they saw some of these youth group kids and some of the leaders. So,
and Brock, to your point, like it's not, in that sense, it's not functioning any different than like high school functions. Yeah. Like people are trying to be cool. They're trying to be in the cool groups or whatever. And there's still cliques and some barriers and things like that. And that's hard to overcome. I'm not saying they should have overcome it, but looking back on it, it caused more problems than we realized.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's the sort of thing that, I mean, from the perspective of the people who were coordinating everything, from youth pastor and leadership and adult volunteers, so much of this stuff it's stuff that I remember feeling, but I never said anything about it, and nobody else probably ever said anything about it either. And it would probably take a lot to push it over the edge. I think these are natural dynamics that a lot of young kids, as they're developing, people who are in their mid-adolescence, are going to feel insecure about stuff. And those cool kids, they felt insecure too. They just had a higher social position necessarily, or like a status of some kind. They might have been slightly more comfortable, or they were just being extroverted to mask the fact that they were uncomfortable. And so it's tricky being a kid. It's hard. I'm once was enough. I'm glad I don't have to do it again. But,
thank goodness.
Yeah.
Indeed. And that's why I give, for the most part, our leaders, the paid youth pastors or the adults, the benefit of the doubt. You can't, the youth group wasn't like, look, I'm really into the show Severance. If you haven't seen it, please go watch it. Best show ever. But, in that show, they have a chip in their brain when they go to work, their outside self shuts off. Youth group can't be like that, where they just, kids waltz in and their outside self is just shut off. As much as they were trying to do that, and going through this podcasting, these conversations, I have to remind myself that that's a kind of an unfair standard to put on our memories of youth group, because they were just trying to help us out through this tough time, and some of these things couldn't be avoided.
I was just thinking about another thing that might be good to share, and I don't know how unique this is, because I don't know what I don't remember hearing you talk about this dynamic with your experience or how it rings with other folks who were involved in church stuff in the 90s, but I feel like it maybe was uncommon for there to be a lot of adults volunteering. Like you might have college kids or something like that volunteering as youth staff that would volunteer to be involved, but it was really unique. Like I mentioned, Gene, as the youth pastor, had been around for like 25 years. But a lot of the volunteers were people our parents' age. And to me, that was surprising, and in my experience, in later youth ministry, volunteering with other programs, other things, like it tended to skew towards, you're going to have kids in their early 20s that are volunteering to help out the youth group and make sure there are enough adults to keep control and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But at this church, we had people who were in their 40s and 50s. Some of my favorite youth leaders were like 55 or 60 years old. Yeah. And they just liked kids. They were young at heart themselves. They had a generous perspective, and it was interesting to me for that to be the case. It was just a dynamic that I don't know is super common. For there to be that many, and even it was a bigger church, but for there to be that many people who were in their 50s and 60s who still want to go sleep in a tent with kids at summer camp, they still want to go keep kids under control at a hotel, at a youth conference, and they'll show up on Sunday morning and be there and share a bit of themselves, a bit of their life, a bit of their perspective with these kids in high school. So that was, to me, interesting.
All of us being parents now understand the value of our time, full-time jobs, supporting a family.
I wouldn't do that now, right?
Exactly.
And not just because I'm agnostic. It's like if I was in the middle of it, I'd be like, I don't have time for that.
That's right. This is a lot. Not only the time, but the emotional investment and everything, the physical investment, all that stuff. And that's what they did. And we've said it many times, and I will continue to repeat it, because I think by chance, if any one of our adult volunteers are listening, we thank you for that time. Maybe things didn't turn out exactly how you would have hoped for us, but that time was valuable to us, and helped us become the people we are because you were willing to do so. And Brock, to your point, like our youth group had a lot of parents too who were just willing to help out. And similarly, some of my favorite people to talk to were like older at that time, what I thought would be older adults. Now I'm that person. And they were fun.
People in their 40s. Goodness me.
My goodness. Yeah. Geez, are you going to die soon? But it was...
Basically.
They were witty. They were funny in their own way. And they just cared. And I think that's what came through, is that they cared. So, no matter what it looks like today, I still am really thankful for their involvement.
For the love of water skiing.
Yes,
that's right.
Teaching a new generation. A few more questions here, because we're keeping you pretty late. My favorite ones. What would your 18-year-old high school self say to your 42-year-old self, and vice versa? Like, what would that conversation be like?
Yeah. What does 18-year-old Brock say to 42-year-old Brock? How could you? Don't you love Jesus? Don't you believe in him?
Sure.
And I'll flush your cigarettes down the toilet for you.
I'll help you out.
I quit smoking in 2018, so I don't do it anymore. But I think
Sure.
18-year-old me would be mortified that that I had succumbed to peer pressure in my mid-20s, and then I smoked for however long it was. When I was a kid in high school, I mean, it was never told to us that it was a sin, but it was kind of treated like that in Baptist circles. That if somebody's smoking cigarettes, something's wrong with that guy.
Oh yeah.
And there was a kid who kind of had a bunch of problems, I think. He was involved in our youth group. But one time he was like, Brock, I'm quitting smoking. Take this pack, flush it down the toilet for me. I want to be done. Just take these, go. So I had them in my bag, and I took them to like community college the next day for my, I was an early start for community college. And so like I trying to figure out, how do you flush these down the toilet? I got to like tear them apart. I got to stuff them in there. I don't want it to overflow. Like, we doing okay here? But yes, 18-year-old Brock would take my cigarettes for me and flush them down the toilet on my behalf.
There is no better social indicator if someone needs Jesus than just some outward like bad behavior, smoking. Like,
that's right.
In high school,
you don't look like us.
Yes,
you're not like us.
In high school, if you smoke, if you drank, if you had sex, you were not a Christian, and that persists.
That's right. And I'll be up front. Smoking's bad for you. It's why I quit. I felt like shit, and so I stopped. But
don't smoke, kids. Don't smoke.
But it's also not a moral judgment, any more than like, now I eat too much saturated fat, and that's also probably bad for me. But is it a sin? Who knows?
I hope not.
I think he would also say, holy crap, how did you get so many cool vinyl records and holy, there are swears on them.
Oh, man.
When I was in high school, I got my Supertone Strike Back vinyl. I still have it, and it was like the biggest deal to me that I got something new, something modern on vinyl, and so that was a huge deal.
Wow.
But again, a lot of swears in my current record collection, and Brock would not be into that.
Same. Yep, I hear you.
Yeah.
What about your older?
42 years? Yeah. If I'm older, I would try and tell. Try to hold a lot of generosity for that kid because I think it was tough. Again, being homeschooled and just not knowing. Like, I was so good at talking to adults. I was so great at talking to people who were 40 and 50. I could make them laugh. I could reference movies that they had seen when they were 15. There were all these things that just like I was socially adjusted for the rest of the world. But people my own age just wasn't there. I wasn't there for it. I didn't know how to talk to guys. I certainly didn't know how to talk to girls. I was trying to figure it out. And so me now talking to me as an 18-year-old kid, being popular or cool isn't as important as you think it is. And that and the love of God that you experience through your friends is the same love that self-acceptance can yield if you're satisfied in being yourself. So I think I was trying to be something for somebody, but I wasn't always comfortable being me. And I think I think I've come to this point now where I'm not trying to impress anybody, or fewer people probably now than I used to be, and I am okay with that. I'm satisfied that me being me is enough, and I don't have to try to be anybody else or be anything for anybody else. So that, and then you don't need a unified working theory of the universe that faith involves and includes doubt or uncertainty. I would say, in a way, I probably still have faith in some things, and that, Rob Bell was the one who said that faith and doubt make very good dance partners, and for as long as Facebook let you have quotes on your profile, I think that was one of them. I think that's gone. I think all those quotes are just somewhere in the ether now. I should have saved them.
That's probably true. Bible
college won't deliver answers. It'll give you educated questions, and that's kind of more what it's about. I think I was very disappointed to find that I wasn't going to get one. And if I had gone to a Bible college that gave me just one correct answer, I would have later found that I was just to be disappointed later. So there's that. But yeah, focusing on the results of being loved and sharing that love. I think that's what I would tell my 18-year-old self.
I will be honest. I think that's one of the most honest answers we've had, and thank you for sharing that, because we don't deserve any amount of honesty. You're willing to share that with us, so thank you for telling us that.
Yeah. Now let me tell you about 90s CCM for about half an hour.
Oh, that's right. Let's go. I'm ready. Oh God, save that for Caleb's music podcast.
He has.
That's right.
He's done great.
Had some great stories on my podcast about it.
In general, overall, how does your 90s youth group experience contribute to the person you are today?
I think Gene's teaching centered around the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do to you. Love God, love each other. And I think it still applies across a religious spectrum. Love and care for others is what it's all about. We see every day the results of not doing that, the results of what it means to be selfish or to make decisions that don't consider how it affects other people. In public life, in traffic, in our finance and who we give to or who we don't give to. What happens in your heart when you decide that you're not going to dig $1 out of your wallet for the guy who's asking for something on the corner. There are so many pieces of that basic guidance that still apply today for me. And so, yeah, and again, the values, it's the reason it sticks is because that's what I saw being done. Somewhere along the way, I saw someone being nice to me. So I know what it feels like to be on the outside and to be welcomed in. And I know what it feels like to be a hungry kid and for someone to give me food, And I wasn't starving. I didn't need anything, but I know what it feels like to be the recipient of generosity. And so I think that definitely contributes to who I am today. Older folks mentoring, I don't know what that looks like for me now. Maybe it's over the internet. Maybe someday somebody listens to this. Maybe I end up finding the secular equivalent of a youth group, and I end up working with kids as a volunteer in my 50s or something. Maybe it's me and my own kids and how I treat them and how I raise them, and I try not to be a jerk as they make decisions that I find deplorable. Yeah. DIY programs, if a church from Auburn, Washington can build a summer camp in a day in Idaho, the sky's the limit. I can build anything I'd like to see, inspired by that you can make a place for people to come together and to share, to have fun, to learn something, to grow, to come together as a community. And I still like to water ski, even though I don't know anybody with a boat. So.
Oh. Well,
hey, Minnesota, anybody out there?
Come on out. Oh, I can get you on a boat, on a lake with a water ski, no problem.
There we go. I still can't swim.
Well, I won't judge you for that.
Thank you.
At least the first day you won't hear me yelling.
Thank you.
I can't even water ski at all.
I tried a couple times, but well, last question. You may have heard these on previous podcasts. And maybe you don't have one, which is fine, but is there any truly gross, borderline illegal story that or event, game that happened during your youth group experience that you would like to share?
I told you about the agricultural water retainer and the pool full of it.
Yes.
That was quite something. That was gross. This wasn't connected specifically to the youth group, but it was a friend that I made through the youth group. Do we have time for a short story?
Oh, yeah.
I'll allow it.
Okay. Thank you. Most of these kids were suburban, but there was a community outside of Auburn called Buckley, Washington. It's where the farmers live. And it was rumored that there were only about 3 families, and they all kind of knew each other. So I was looking for employment as a kid. I just wanted to, make some money I could spend on records. I could spend at the thrift store and buy some tapes or whatever. And so one of the things I remember hearing about is you talk to a farmer who's got a hay field. He's going to need somebody to throw bales. And so I ended up talking to a kid a couple years older than me. His name was Josh, and he was from Buckley. He knew a farmer in Buckley, and he was like, "Oh yeah, come up with me. We'll get you a job. We'll throw some bales. We'll make some cash." So we go out and we throw bales all day. I got super sweaty and I got paid minimum wage, but I had money in my pocket and I could go to Taco Bell. I could buy tapes. I could buy records, whatever. And at the end of the day, my mom picks me up because I'm 15. I can't drive myself yet. And she picks me up, and the farmer, just in course of conversations, oh yeah, and there's this bull, or it was a calf, but it was a male calf. We can't have it. It's not gonna make milk. We don't need another bull, whatever. We're gonna send it off to the slaughterhouse. And my mom says, well, that's impossible. You can't kill this beautiful, cute little baby calf. We'll take it home. And so she opens up the family van. It's like a 10-seater van. And she's hauling me and a couple of childhood friends and my sisters probably. And we take this baby calf and we just put it in the van and we drive home. We stop at Burger King on the way. At that time, the classic famous Whopper sandwich was 99 cents a piece. And so she bought like 10 Whoppers for these teenage boys and my sisters in the van. Mm-hmm. And then we take the cow home and we raise it because, what are you going to do? Kill it? That's cruel. That's humane. That's inhumane. And so we raised a cow for about a year and a half.
What?
And that wouldn't have come, unless we actually had the youth group experience, the connections, and that sort of thing. We did eventually kill the cow, but it was grown up.
Okay, so
it was okay.
A few things. A lot of that was like the good old days for me. Taco Bell, minimum wage. 99-cent Whoppers just like injected into my veins. I want that life back. But also
too.
Also like
the Clinton presidency.
Yeah, it's like 98-cent gas a gallon
I do remember that. That was so cheap.
Yeah.
My goodness.
It was great. But like
full tank, $15.
What? So you killed the cow and then did you butcher it? Like what happened? Like did you just do the same thing that you were going to do 2 years earlier?
Yes. Yep, that's exactly what happened.
All right. So your mom got like a free 500 pounds of ground beef for nothing.
Basically, yeah. We had steaks. We had every part of the cow. Yeah, it's true.
That's true. It's true. Well, I did not expect.
Hold on, I'm sorry. I have more questions. Did you have a big enough yard? I mean, because when they do their business, if you like my backyard is not big, and it's a pretty standard suburban backyard. And Scott, I know your backyard. I've seen your backyard.
It's
you have a cow do his business twice there, and that's your backyard. I mean, you've
got some work to do.
Where did you have? Well, how big of a?
He's asking where the cow took a.
I want to know where the cow pooped.
Yeah, no, it's valid question. We had about 1.25 acres, and I want to say maybe 1/3 of an acre was all fenced off. We had chickens, we had a pig at one point, we had dogs that ran the field. We just kind of made space for the cow to grow up, and there was enough space for it to have a life. So, maybe not the biggest field a cow's ever roamed in, but it was definitely there was enough grass to chew on. There was enough enough space. It was good. We lived in a town that didn't incorporate maybe until my senior year of high school, and so it was pretty rural. My dad's still on septic now. It's the sort of thing that modern life just kind of came in a lot more slowly. But yeah, that was where the cow lived, was in one of the fenced areas on the property.
You're already one of my daughters. You're one of her favorite guests on my shows. Oh, and the fact that you have a pig is going to make her even more endeared to her, because
that's right. She's a big pig
obsessed
fan,
with pigs. Yeah, so
I shouldn't tell you what happened to the pig either.
No, she knows. She's not stupid. she. We visit a pig farm for her birth. We're so off the rails. I'm so sorry, Scott. We visit a pig farm every year for her birthday. And it's this amazing woman who lets her come out and get in the pen with these pigs every year. Yeah. It's amazing. And we knew, they get processed. But one of our favorites was a pig named Chubbers, who fit his name. And eventually, by his last year that we saw him, the fat above his eyes was so fat that he couldn't see. It had rolled over his eyes. I mean, this pig had lived its best life. And my little daughter had a little stuffed pig named Chubbers. And she brought Chubbers to the farm, and we started looking for Chubbers, and it was like, oh, Chubbers is gone.
Chubbers, no.
He went to a different farm in the country for the rest of his days.
And it was this realization between me and Michelle, who runs this farm. Now, we probably need to coordinate who got processed every year so that she's ready for it. Because she gets it. Like, these cows, these pigs live their best life. Mm-hmm. And eventually this is what has to happen. But it was this little, shock to, Chubbers is gone. Oh, man.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Mine was named Gub Gub because, again, I was a homeschooled kid, and that was the name of the pig in the Dr. Dolittle books from the 30s, and that's what I was reading.
Very nice. Excellent.
Oh, man.
Oh, man. Well, Brock, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate this conversation. It's been cool to get to chat with you a little bit, get to know you. I hope we get to talk again in the future here. But thank you for your honesty. It's again, we don't ask for or deserve any of it, but thanks for being willing to kind of share where you're at and with your journey, because it's whatever's happened up to this point. That 90s youth group experience is still pretty special for a lot of people. So thanks for sharing that with us.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Scott, Caleb, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And I appreciate the space you guys are making here, because there's not a lot of places where you let somebody say, within reason, whatever they want to say, without arguing about it. And it's rare. And that's a form of kindness. So thank you.
You're welcome. I'm still looking for something that will make Caleb start arguing, like some comment about 5-iron or something.
5-iron frenzy sucks.
God, they're the worst. Or like maybe it's me, or maybe it's a guest who like says something incorrect about some comic book or something, and Caleb's eyes just like light up. And I'm like, oh, I'm not going to put the disclaimer in this episode because I disagree with what you're saying.
No, I am thankful for this space to kind of be able to get to say things. There are some stuff that could probably get me going. I'm not going to lie. There's probably some music takes that could probably push me over the edge. And there's definitely speaking of your other podcast, the podcast that you do, the Pickle Home Companion, which is an offshoot of Joe and Reese's podcast. There are things that they say about comic books that I infuriate me. Like there are times where I've had to shut off their stupid podcast because they're so wrong about comic books, and I just want to be like,
this is a bridge too far.
Yeah, I was like, both of you need to shut up. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I would be remiss if I went on here without talking about a Pickle Home Companion.
Please.
The podcast that follows up on the Pickle and Boot Shop podcast with Joe and Reese. Mm-hmm. Me and 3 other friends. We got Kevin, Pete, and Jared, and myself. We ostensibly were a wrap or a follow-up show that talks about the topics that they talked about on Pickle and Boot Shop, but we haven't been doing a very good job of that. We've been booking our own guests and having our own conversations and all this, and so it's a wildly good time. We did talk to Reese Roper, and that's dropping, I think, tomorrow as we record this. So
dang,
yeah, yep.
You're a rogue podcast. Good for you.
That's right, the only kind.
And all of them, except for Kevin, maybe I got to find a spot for Kevin, will eventually be on my podcast as well. All have guest spots coming up for 3 of them. So I need to maybe find a way to have Kevin on the show at some point too.
Yeah, you got a Blunderhead anniversary coming up. I was trying to remember.
That
or Pulses, period. That's a band that Kevin just loves. He's super excited about them right now. If you find the anniversary to a Pulses, period album, I don't think you're supposed to say the period, but there's a period in the band name. But he'll be on.
There's a 90-pound wuss might be a good one for him. I know he's got
for sure.
He's got that on his little record wall.
Yeah,
last time I saw. So
funny.
Yep, Pacific Northwest, baby.
And the weird connection to Mars Hill Church. What a strange connection.
90-pound
wuss and Mars Hill Church.
Oh my goodness.
Who would have had that in their bingo card in the late 90s? Lead singer, this is so off the rails. I love it.
This is the important stuff.
The lead singer of 90-Pound Wuss ended up being a worship leader at Mars Hill Church before it imploded. Like
was it Mars Hill downtown?
Yep. And it's on if you go listen to, again, I'm not a huge podcast guy, but the Rise and Fall of Mars Hill, he's on an episode. So
yeah, he gave some great interviews, had some really astute observations, and he's a guy that's kind of landed similar to where I have. He's got a similar story. It's unique, of course, but he's got his own path that led him to where he is today. He's got a lot of really great observations about kind of how that happened and why.
It's not Dustin Kensrud, is it?
No, that's the guy from Thrice.
Yeah, that's a different band.
That's right.
Yeah.
Which I messed up on a podcast recently. I'm so embarrassed.
How dare you?
No problem.
I'm not a big Thrice guy.
Hey, neither am I.
Funny.
Can I? One of the best parts of 90-Pound Wuss is that is it the first track on the record? I forget. Like one of their albums. There's this song that starts off with them telling a story about going to Shelton, Washington, which, if you can imagine the armpit of any region of your state, it's similar. Just like this tiny little rural, backwater. And
hey, we have listeners in Shelton, so settle down.
Excuse me. It's a story of them being this punk band playing a show, or at least like stopping at a gas station in Shelton, Washington. And these like good old boys pull up in a pickup truck, and they're like, "You boys are in Shelton, so beware." And that made it onto the record.
Wow.
It's pretty great.
Oh, funny.
That's awesome.
Well, I don't know how to end this, but at any rate.
I think we start Caleb's other podcast.
That's true. At some
Welcome
point, it's just
to the album anniversary podcast.
Are we doing Earthsuit yet? All right. Thanks, man. This has been great.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Really awesome conversation. Really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of I Survived Youth Group in the 90s. We hope you enjoyed it. Once again, we want to say thanks to Brock for joining us. It was great to hear him talk about his experience in youth group and how it's impacted his life. He's a great guest. I love having him on the music show. I was super excited to have him come and join us on this show as well. Let us know what you thought about this show or any of our other episodes. You can find us on Twitter at the handle @SurvivedYG. You can also email us at isurvivedyouthgroup@gmail.com. If you're interested in being on the show, let us know. You didn't have to necessarily attend our youth group. But if you have your own youth group experience from the 90s to the 2000s, we'd love to connect. We'd love to have you in the show. Please subscribe and share the podcast. If you're so inclined, leave a rating or a review. If you enjoy this show, you might also enjoy the other podcast I do. It's a music podcast called the Album Anniversary Podcast. Over the last couple of years, I've researched and documented the release date of thousands of albums. Throughout the week, I post about them on social media. We've had a couple different formats on the show, but it's a chance to talk about some music that I've documented on my calendar. Once again, that's called the Album Anniversary Podcast. The music at the beginning and the end of this show is the instrumental version of the song Positive Charge by the Editor's Dread Pirate Roberts. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. And then lastly, sorry, go ahead.
No, please continue.
I got too many on the list.
This is good. This is a great list.
Yeah, it's a great list.
Yeah.
And we should really, if you want to do an Earthsuit episode, let's make this happen.
I'm down because honestly, I coach my son's baseball team and I've been doing it for years. And so the advent of youth sports is really stupid, but we have a big speaker and we have the playlist. And so the coaches can have a playlist and then the kids have their own playlist, which is,
music
crap.
Is life.
Yeah,
I mean, not good.
And everyone has terrible taste.
It's not the worst. It's not the best or whatever. My favorite is the walk-up music because we can do all that now, whatever. Anyway, I have 3 Mute Math songs on there, and my favorite thing about it is that once a season, a dad, and one season it was a dad from an opposite team, the opposing team, came up to me and was like, "Dude, what was that song?
What is that? That was amazing."
Yeah.
What song was it? Which one?
It was Spotlight.
Here in. Oh, sure.
Yeah, it was Spotlight.
So they haven't seen Twilight?
Because
that was on the soundtrack.
I wish
that was
I'd
the big
that.
break in a way. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, I love them very much. So I'm down.
Yeah, me too.
I'm down.
Me too. Cool. Well, we've got to start
set it
scheduling
up.
our next podcast now. Yeah.
There you go. All
Thanks,
right.
gents. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Good to meet you.
Yeah. Good to meet you. Good to see your face.
Again, sorry, disappoints.
Okay,
Caleb, I'll upload this to you then.
I don't know where to cut this. Holy cow. Yeah.
You're gonna have to. This
Should we
is gonna
keep on
be
going?
Editing
I'm game.
magic.
This
am
is like a Pickle Home Companion.
We got another hour here. This is what I do for Pickle Home Companion. I just anytime we're about to do something, I push it just somewhere
A
else.
little bit more.
That's it.
My favorite thing about it is the joke about talking about Furnace Fest has become a joke that because how many more wrap-up episodes about Furnace Fest can we do?
For real, it's no longer an episode unless we mention Furnace Fest in some way.
Oh man. Oh. I will send you a
Too
link
bad it's
to our-
gone. Too bad it'll never happen again. Yeah,
Wait, I thought Eric said it was happening.
it is.
Oh,
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, but a bunch of people got tattoos that said it was over though, so I don't know what they're gonna do about it.
Those poor people.
Yeah, it's pretty rough.
I have not been to a music festival in so long. I should really do that.
Yeah.
That'd be fun.
It's still loud. It's still dirty. You
Really?
still
What
get hungry.
festival are you going to go
Sunburned.
to, Scott? The only ones around here are country.
I know, that's the thing. My neighbor has a ice house / camper thing that he pulls to the Bluegrass Festival every summer, and I haven't been able to go because coaching my son's baseball team, but that actually looks pretty fun. So maybe one of these days. I can get into bluegrass, all right?
Better start now.
You can get into bluegrass if you can also get into drinking outdoors. Can you do that?
You can do that.
I can do that.
There you go. Okay.
You know what?
It's a tough job, but somebody has to do it.
I'm already into it, if I'm honest.
I drink at the youth sports.
I drink in the dugout, so
there you go. That's how it's done.
Oh, God.